Hey, everybody, welcome in. It is a Hall of Fame game preview edition of the Utopia Football Podcast. I am Sean Pendergast, one half of Payne and Pendergast on Sports Radio 610, where you can hear us 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. daily on Sports Radio 610 on 610 a.m. on your radio, on the Odyssey app. You can search us on there, and you can watch the show on YouTube and Twitch as well, just like you can with this podcast. You can get it on the Odyssey app or wherever it is you get your podcasts, or you can watch us on YouTube and I believe Twitch, but definitely YouTube. You can stream if you want to watch me talking into a microphone on the podcast. Sometimes it feels a little more intimate that way. But however it is you're listening to the podcast or consuming it, I very much appreciate it. This will be a quick hitter for a game day for the Texans, the rare August 1st football game. Usually when the calendar flips over to August 1st, you kind of get the whiff of football. You know that there's a preseason game kind of coming up in 9 or 10 days, something like that. You've probably had a few, maybe 3 or 4 training camp practices under your belt. And I'm not just talking about players and coaches. I'm talking about we as media members and fans. If you're listening to this podcast, you're in it. You're into these 10 practices. You've got updates on all 10 of these damn practices from me. So you're into it if you're listening to this thing. It's very, very strange for the calendar to flip over to August 1st, and we are just hours away from a football game, albeit one that both sides are expected to sit their starters for. But who the hell cares? It is American football on August the 1st, Hall of Fame game, and we're ready for it. So I want to get you ready for that with some things to watch for based on things that I've seen out at training camp for the first 10 practices. These will just be things that I'm excited to see, just a handful of them, and you can follow along with me as we watch the game. As far as the administrative piece here, first of all, on the podcast, hit the subscribe button. You guys know I remind you of that before every podcast. If you haven't done that yet, and you've heard me say it 3 or 4 times now, especially you folks, hit the subscribe button. Then you don't have to worry about it. You'll just get the podcast sent to you, and on your way we go. If you need to send me an email, if you want to send me an email, we just did a big mailbag episode that dropped on Wednesday. We're going to do another one. We do one every Tuesday. Training camp, it's been a little different because I've been doing podcasts literally every day after every practice. And we're only halfway through all the practices. So get signed up. Subscribe. If you want to hit me with an email that gets answered in the mailbag, houmailbag@gmail.com is how you do that. As far as how the schedule lays out for the next several days, the Hall of Fame game is tonight. You can catch the pregame and postgame show on Sports Radio 610. Pregame starting at 4, postgame starting shortly after the game ends. I will be co-hosting once again this season with Seth Payne on the pregame show. So for those of you that actually come out to games and things like that, be sure to stop by and see us outside the stadium. We'll be in the same spot we've always been in on that stage, or at least that we were in the last couple of years, right outside of the Bud Light Plaza there. And then post-game, I'll be doing once again with Clint Stoerner. Tonight's post-game show, if you're listening to this on Thursday, will be it'll be me and Clint for maybe the entire show. We might get some Brandon Scott in there. Clint's going to be at the stadium, so for however long they allow him to stay connected with me, he'll be on with me. But you'll get a chance to sound off. We take phone calls and things like that. And then we're kind of off of Texans practice for a few days because we got Andre Johnson going into the Hall of Fame on Saturday. Texans obviously off on Friday, off on Saturday for the Hall of Fame. They're off again on Sunday. Their next 3 practices will be in Ohio leading up to the Pittsburgh Steelers preseason game that they're going to play next Friday on August the 9th. So the next practice that takes place in Houston, which I hope to see a lot of you at, is the evening practice. I think that starts at 4:30 or 5:30. Starts late Sunday afternoon, August the 11th. That'll be the next practice that if you're in Houston, you're going to be able to put eyes on. Other than that, we need to rely on some of the excellent beat reporters and streamers and folks that are going to actually be in Ohio. I know I'll be relying heavily on them to get good reports, and we're lucky. We've got a good group of people up there with eyes on that. So that's kind of how things lay out over the next several days. And then once the Texans are back in town here, it's very conventional. They've got 2 more home games here in the preseason against the Giants and the Rams. They're both going to take place on a Saturday afternoon, the 17th and the 24th. So they'll have a few practices each of those weeks, including a joint practice with the Rams 2 days before that game on August the 22nd. There's all kinds of great stuff coming up here with the Texans, and hopefully big thing is they can go 0-4 in the preseason. I just want everybody to stay healthy. So that's the big thing for me. And that's probably a good segue into this Hall of Fame game coming up Thursday night in Canton, Ohio. Is that the main thing is everybody get out of there healthy. They're not going to play the Texans, neither team actually, but the Texans, D'Amico Ryans has not said it publicly. He's basically said, watch the game and you'll see who's playing. Matt Eberflus, the coach of the Bears, a little more transparent. He announced his starters won't be playing. I saw a report from Aaron Wilson of KPRC Channel 2 that CJ Stroud and many of the starters are not expected to play in this game, which I've got no problem. I have no problem if CJ doesn't play a single snap in the preseason, if I'm being honest. I feel like the work he's getting out of practice and then a joint practice with the Rams, that's enough for me to feel comfortable with CJ Stroud going into the season. I know that won't be the case. He'll play a few series, possibly in that Pittsburgh game and maybe in that Giants game. But I don't need it. I really don't. By the way, congratulations to CJ, number 20 in the NFL top 100 coming off of his rookie season. That's outstanding. So the Texans wind up with 4 players total in the NFL top 100. CJ at 20, Stephon Diggs at 56, Danielle Hunter at 68, and Laramie Tunsil at 71. Those are the 4 players that wind up in the NFL top 100. That'll be a topic for another time. We can hit that next week. But as long as we were talking about CJ, just wanted to drop some congrats in there. So health is the main thing we're looking for. But as far as things I will be watching for in the game on Thursday night, I think there will be some players who are borderline starters or they're definite like second string plus kind of guys. And I'll start with Damen Pierce on that one. Damen Pierce, and really the whole running back room is something I'm anxious to watch. We won't see Joe Mixon in this game. We haven't seen Joe Mixon practice for the last 8 practices. He's only practiced twice. He's not practiced in pads yet. But we all know how Damen Pierce's 2023 season went. He was one of the bigger disappointments on the team. He would be the first to admit that. That team did not have a ton of disappointment on it based on our expectations. Damen was one of them. Damen was a guy who was front and center, one of the faces of this team, I think, going into last season. And he made no bones about the fact that he was kind of overwhelmed in this new offensive scheme. And he told me and Clint Stoerner in the postgame show in week 16 that the Texans probably wouldn't see the best version of Damen Pierce until 2024. Well, it's 2024. So now it's time. And with Joe Mixon nursing that leg injury throughout camp, Pierce has been getting a ton of reps with the starters in camp. He's going to play on Thursday night. And now it's against an actual opponent. It's not guys in shoulder pads thudding you. It's going to be the Bears trying to knock your block off. So let's see if the offseason that Pierce has had and the work that he's put in both in rewatching himself and in camp translates into something that's a whole lot closer to the 2022 Damen Pierce. I'm rooting for it. I love Damen Pierce, the person. I think Damen Pierce is a great dude, and I'm really, really rooting for him to get back into this rotation running back-wise. But as far as the rest of that room, it's a really interesting room. I think we had an emailer send in a mailbag question that we dropped yesterday, but it's worth repeating now. I'll throw Jawar Jordan, the rookie 6th-round pick out of Louisville, onto this list of guys that I'm looking forward to watching in this game. Jawar Jordan has really done some nice things, but it's been running with the 2s and the 3s against the Texans' 2s and 3s. But he's popped, and not a lot of the guys in this backfield have popped at times. And Jawar Jordan, over the padded practices, the last couple, has done some really, really good things. There's going to be somebody, I think, that gets cut from this running back group who I think maybe at the beginning of the preseason we expected to make the team, especially with the addition of Cam Akers, the veteran running back who's played for the Rams and the Vikings. Really, that position group is one I'm anxious to watch because they've all done some decent things at times in this camp, and yet the running game has not really gotten untracked yet without Joe Mixon in there and with the offensive line having its struggles really at all 3 strings, 1st string, 2nd string, 3rd string. No Laramie Tunsil with that 1st string is worth noting, and I doubt we won't see Laramie Tunsil playing, obviously, in Thursday night's game. Blake Fisher will be somebody to watch. But that running back room as a whole, but specifically Damen Pierce and Jawar Jordan, Pierce number 31 and Jawar Jordan number 42, those will be 2 guys that I will be watching, exceptionally watching both of them. So the rookies, this is number 2. So the running back room, number 1. Number 2, the rookies. If I had to guess, I think all the rookies are going to play in this game. Kamari Lassiter is probably the closest thing to being a rookie who could get treated like a veteran because he has been the starting cornerback the entire time at training camp this year and has played well. This is not somebody who's getting anointed the starter and then he's not as good as these other guys, but he was our second round pick, so let's throw him in there. He's played he's been exceptional in training camp this year. That said, he needs the reps. He needs them more than Derek Stingley does. So I would expect to see Lassiter get at least a few reps. Maybe he gets the same treatment like CJ Stroud got last year, where he plays a couple of series and that's it. Blake Fisher, I expect to play more than that, even though he's been running with the ones throughout camp at left tackle. We know that's because Laramie Tunsil has not been practicing. It's not because Blake Fisher has earned the starting job with this team. I would expect to see Blake Fisher get some reps, and maybe even they bump him over to right tackle since ultimately he forecasts to be the swing tackle for this team. So I would expect that we'll see Blake Fisher starting at left tackle and then perhaps staying in the game to play some right tackle in this game. That would make sense to me. I think beyond that, the other rookies are all going to get the rookie treatment. They're going to play a whole lot of snaps in this game. Kalen Bullock, the third-round pick, the safety, who has looked really good at times in camp as well. Cade Stover, the tight end out of Ohio State in the fourth round, has had his moments. I mentioned Jawar Jordan. Jamal Hill is another one, the linebacker that I'm looking forward to watching because I think there is a linebacker spot or two to be had on this team if somebody has an exceptional preseason. So Jamal Hill, the rookie out of Oregon, former safety, converted linebacker. And then beyond that, there's a couple rookie defensive linemen who are on the team. Marcus Harris out of Auburn, Solomon Byrd out of USC. I am fully expect both of them to be on the practice squad, not on the 53. But let's take a look. Let's watch them. So watching this rookie class for me will be something to keep an eye on as well. That's number 2. Number 3, the wide receiver room, specifically John Mechie III. John Mechie is expected to play in this game. I have him listed right now to me as the 4th wide receiver on this team based on things that D'Amico Ryans has said during camp, based on things that Nick Caserio has said during camp. Kind of when the two of them kind of list out that position, it's always the big 3 of Tank Dell, Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs, but Mechie's name gets thrown in there quite a bit. CJ Stroud has had some great things to say about John Mechie III throughout the offseason when they've been working out together. And it's matched the eye test out at camp. The one-on-one drills that John Mechie has been a part of, he has been cooking some of these guys in these drills. He's had issues with drops at times, but I feel like, especially in the case of Mechie, I can live with a few drops during training camp if he looks explosive. The drops you can work on, and it's just a concentration issue. If he's not looking explosive or more explosive than he has these last 2 years, if he's not looking to the level of explosiveness that they expected when they drafted him with a second-round pick, that's a much bigger problem than him dropping balls in camp. So Mechie should play in this game. So I'm anxious to see if what we've seen him do with defensive backs in camp, if that's something he does with the Bears DBs that play in this game. The wide, again, a little like running back where I'm like, man, I'm really looking forward to watching Pierce, but I'm anxious about the whole room. Similarly, Mechie's the guy who of all the wide receivers who I expect to play in this game, he's the one that I'm most looking forward to watching. And yet that whole position group is one, I think even more so than running back. They're going to cut at least 1 or 2 wide receivers. They're going to wind up immediately on other NFL teams. That should be a whole lot of fun to watch, the battle for what I'll call like the 6th wide receiver position. I think there's 5 guys that, as of right now, are virtual locks to make the team. It's Diggs, it's Collins, it's Dell, and then Mechie and Noah Brown, I think, are right there, which leaves Ben Skoranek and Robert Woods and Steven Sims battling for spots. Johnny Johnson. You got the Yankee kid that they signed, number 83. There's a lot of guys in camp who have flashed that time. So wide receiver, specifically Mechie, is another one. The next one, so that's 3 right now. The running backs, the rookies, the wide receivers, the new kickoff rule. If you haven't watched any footage yet of what kickoffs are going to look like in the NFL this year, do yourself a favor and go do it before this game, or make this game be the first time you're watching it. But if you haven't watched yet, it's going to look very, very different from what you're used to seeing. Probably very chaotic and poorly executed because most teams are doing this stuff. Every team in the NFL is practicing this new kickoff rule for the first time. If you're unfamiliar with it, the kickoff takes place from the same spot. Kicker kicks off from his own 35-yard line, but instead of the coverage unit being there lined up with him and running down the field full sprint, The coverage team is already down in the enemy territory. They're lined up 5 yards across from the blockers, and the play does not start. The blockers and the coverage team cannot move until the return guy touches the football. It's looked weird in camp if you're not used to it. I have no idea if this is going to be something that results in way more touchdowns than the NFL thinks, or just the kickoff return being something that actually is tough to execute and pins teams deep. I know that every special teams group, every special teams coach and coordinator, they've been in the lab trying to figure this thing out. The Texans and the Bears will be the first actual real NFL game that incorporates these rules. So let's see what it looks like. So that'll be interesting. And so I'll make a full special teams bullet point here, because it's not just the kickoff rules. Texans have a new punter, Tommy Townsend, who looks like he has got a major hang time leg. He's been really good for the Chiefs the last few years. He may be an upgrade over Cam Johnston, which is saying something, because Cam Johnston was very good the last 3 years for the Texans. So let's see what Tommy Townsend does in a game situation with the Texans. But I would say overall special teams, the new kickoff rule and the new punter, the two big things, and who they use back there in returns on the new kickoffs, I think will be interesting to see, because I can tell you, having been out at practice, they are trying everybody out. If you're a wide receiver or a running back or anybody who can run with the ball in their hands, Desmond King, throw him in there, nickelback, you've had a chance to field punts and kicks in this camp. They're wide open. They are a blank slate right now when it comes to special teams. So let's see how that plays out. So that's number 4. Last thing, number 5 that I'm looking forward to, Davis Mills is expected to start this game, is what I've been reading. And the fact that they trotted him out to the podium yesterday or Tuesday, that they made him available to the media, would indicate to me as well that he's going to be starting for this team and playing some snaps. Let's see how Davis Mills looks in year 2 in the system. He's had some good practices. He's had some bad practices in camp. He's had times where he's looked like a very viable NFL quarterback in this system. He's had times where he's looked like Davis Mills. So let's see what exactly Davis Mills is. Does he perform to a level where other teams might be calling Nick Caserio about him, or at least putting Davis Mills' name on that list of quarterbacks that if there's an injury, you pull that list out of your top drawer and you start making phone calls? Half the league practically runs this system now. So having Davis Mills look really proficient in this system is not only a good thing for the Texans if something were to happen to CJ Stroud, it's a good thing to happen to the Texans if other teams have issues and they want to make a trade for Davis Mills. Now, Davis Mills looks that good. I'm not so sure you want to trade him if all you're getting is like a day 3 pick or a 3rd round pick. Having a backup quarterback with this group of players, you could muck your way through and win some games. I don't know if Case Keenum is still at the level where you can call upon him like they did last year to go win a game for you. And it's not like Case was great in that game either against Tennessee. So, and Tim Boyle is not somebody I want anywhere near the keys to this offense. So on many levels, Davis Mills' performance on Thursday is one that I will be keeping an eye on, really hoping Davis Mills looks as good and as comfortable in this offense as he's looked at times in practice this year. So those are the 5 big things that I'm going to be watching for in this Hall of Fame game. Damen Pierce in the running back room, the rookie class, John Mechie and the wide receiver room, special teams, specifically the kickoff rule, and Tommy Townsend, and then Davis Mills. Those will be the things that I'll be looking at throughout the broadcast, and hopefully we get a little Andre Johnson on that broadcast like we did on the Astros broadcast last night. That was really cool to see the Astros do what they did with Andre. It's always more fun in this town when the teams are acting collaboratively, and when we as a media and as fan bases are acting collaboratively and rooting for the other teams instead of throwing shade at the other teams. And I'm talking about on the radio and I'm talking about with fans. It's just more fun being a Houstonian when it's that way than when you've got the various fan bases. And I understand that the Rockets and the Texans deserve their fair share of shade over the last couple of years until this past season for each of them. But hey, man, we're all Houstonians. Let's all root for the common cause. So that was cool to see the Astros doing that with Andre Johnson, giving out the bobblehead, and he did an autograph session there, and they really celebrated his induction into Canton coming up this weekend. So I know a lot of you are headed to Canton to go see that. Man, have a blast. Enjoy yourself. If you think about it, shoot me an email to houmailbag@gmail.com, and would love to hear what your experience was like with that. Maybe I'll read some of the emails from people who went to the Hall of Fame ceremony when we do the mailbag next week, because this is a big deal. This is the first one for the Houston Texans. So Can't wait to see all the Texan fans or watch you on TV. I will not be there in person because I got to be back here to do pregame and postgame for the Hall of Fame game. And then once you bake in a Friday show and getting on a plane on a Friday afternoon, and bringing my wife with me, it ends up being about $3,000 for a 36-hour trip. I think Andre will get by without me up in Canton. So I'll be back here in Houston watching it and then getting ready for this preseason to keep rolling on, man. This is fun times. I hope you guys are enjoying the podcast. Hope you're enjoying the daily updates. This has been your preview for the Hall of Fame game. I will be back with one more episode this week, likely on Friday, with my review of the game, winners and losers, things that we saw out there that matter. So I will be back later this week with that. In the meantime, subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. Most importantly, tell a friend. I appreciate all of you for listening. Big thanks to my producer, Anthony Irwin, for getting the podcast as he does. He's been working overtime, man, during this training camp, getting the podcast out to each and every one of you. So until then, enjoy the Hall of Fame game and have a great rest of your day. Thanks for listening to the Utopia Football Podcast.